You know, when you think of the great names in science, one of them is probably connected to something sitting in your fridge right now. But the story of Louis Pasteur? Oh, it's about a whole lot more than just keeping your food fresh.
Seriously, when you hear that name, Pasteur, what's the first thing you picture? I bet for most of us, it's one very specific thing.
Yep, pasteurizations. And look, that alone is an incredible legacy, right? I mean, a process that made our food supply safer and totally changed entire industries. Huge.
But that's just the tip of the iceberg. If you really want to get who Louis Pasteur was, you have to think of him as a fighter, a scientist who literally went to war against the biggest, most accepted ideas of his day, all to drag medicine kicking and screaming into the modern age.
So let's dive in. And our story doesn't start in a hospital or a clinic. Nope, it starts in a chemistry lab. You've got Pasteur peering at these weird little crystals he found in wine vats. He had no idea, but he was about to uncover the first clue that life itself has a secret architectural blueprint. So he's studying this stuff, tartaric acid, and he notices something that just doesn't make sense. The crystals came in two different shapes, and they were perfect mirror images of each other. Think about your hands, right? They're mirror images, but you can't stack your left hand perfectly on top of your right. Same deal. He just stumbled upon molecular asymmetry, what scientists now call chirality, a totally fundamental property of matter. And this is where it gets really wild. This handedness is so profound. Take a molecule called limonene. It's made of the exact same atoms, but they're arranged as mirror images. The right-handed version, it smells like oranges, but its left-handed twin smells like lemons. How crazy is that? Pasteur basically proved that the molecules that make up life have a specific shape, and this was a huge deal. It meant that life wasn't just a bunch of random chemicals sloshing around. It was precise, like a lock and a key. Okay, so this idea that life is built on these very specific, precise structures, it leads Pasteur right into his next major fight. And this was a big one. He was about to take on one of the hottest debates of the 19th century, the theory of spontaneous generation. You know, that ancient belief that life could just, poof, appear out of nowhere. And this right here, this is pure genius. To settle this whole debate once and for all, Pasteur designs an experiment that's so elegant, so simple, that it's just impossible to argue with. He takes some nutrient broth, boils it in these special flasks with a long S-shaped neck. Now the cool part is the neck lets air in, but it traps all the dust and microbes from the air in its curves. And as long as that neck was there, the broth stayed totally clear, totally sterile. But the second he snapped that neck off and let the dust fall in, boom, life. Just like that, with one powerful demonstration, Pasteur completely shatters a belief that had been around for 2,000 years. He proved that life doesn't just happen, it comes from other life. This principle, omnis vivum ex vivo, all life from life, well, that became the bedrock for the germ theory of disease. And look, this wasn't just some dusty academic win for him. Pasteur's was obsessed with making this stuff useful. He immediately takes his brand new germ theory out of the lab and puts it to work solving some of France's biggest problems, both economic and medical. First up, the French wine industry. It was in big trouble, with batches constantly going sour. Pasteur comes in and proves that these tiny, unwanted microbes were the culprits, and then he shows them that just a little bit of gentle heat, not enough to mess with the taste, could kill them off. This process, which we now call pasteurization, didn't just save the wine industry, it became a cornerstone of modern food safety. The impact on medicine was, well, it was electric. You had surgeons like Alphonse Guérin, who, inspired by Pasteur, started thinking, hey, maybe it's germs in the air causing all these deadly infections after surgery. So he develops these cotton dressings to filter the air, a huge leap toward sterile surgery. His supporters, like Charles Sedilot, even came up with a new name for these invisible things, microbes. And then in 1881, Pasteur puts on this big public show. He vaccinates a bunch of sheep against anthrax, leaves another group unprotected. The result? The vaccinated sheep lived. The others didn't. The proof was just undeniable. But all of this, it was all leading up to Pasteur's biggest, most audacious, and yeah, most controversial fight yet. He was going to try and conquer rabies. I mean, this was a disease so horrific it was a guaranteed, terrifying death sentence. It literally turned its victims mad before it killed them. And then, a desperate case shows up right on his doorstep. a 9-year-old boy, Joseph Meister. He'd been viciously mauled by a rabid dog. He had 14 bites all over his body. Everyone knew what that meant. Without some kind of miracle, his death was an absolute certainty. So Pasteur has this just agonizing choice to make. See, he'd been working on a vaccine. He figured out how to weaken the rabies virus using dried rabbit spinal cords. And it worked every time on dogs. But, and this is a huge but, he had never, not once, tested it on a human. And to top it all off, he wasn't even a medical doctor. If he gave this kid the treatment, he was putting his entire career, his entire reputation on the line. And the pressure was just suffocating. The entire medical establishment was skeptical, to say the least. You had powerful guys like Michel Pieter who would publicly mock his germ theory. This guy saw Pasteur as just some chemist who was sticking his nose where it didn't belong. He even said to Pasteur's face, "What do I care about your microbe?" Talk about hostile. But a boy's life was on the line, and he had the support of 2 actual physicians who basically said, "Look, this is the kid's only shot." So Pasteur did it. He went ahead. For 11 days, they gave the boy a series of injections, each one with a slightly stronger version of the virus, basically training his immune system to fight it off. You can just imagine, the whole world was watching. And it worked. Joseph Meister survived. The news went everywhere. It was a global sensation. So, this victory over rabies, it was so much bigger than just saving one boy's life. This was the birth of modern immunology. It cemented Pasteur's legacy forever and created this unstoppable momentum to build a new kind of institution, one totally dedicated to fighting these invisible enemies. And that became the Pasteur Institute. It opened in Paris in 1887, paid for by donations from all over the world. It was built on his core ideas: rigorous science, different fields working together. And today, it's a global powerhouse against infectious diseases. And here's a really touching end of the story. Joseph Meister, the boy whose life Pasteur saved, he grew up and later came to work at the Institute as a concierge, a living, breathing testament to its founding miracle. But, the story of science is never just a straight line of wins. For all its amazing triumphs over the years, the Institute recently faced a really tough modern challenge. During the COVID-19 pandemic, with all that history and expertise, it actually failed to produce a working vaccine. So where does that leave us? Does the Institute struggle with COVID somehow tarnish Pasteur's legacy? I don't think so. In a weird way, it almost proves his point. His whole life was one brutal fight after another, against bad ideas, against the establishment, and against the microbes themselves. He showed us that science isn't about easy wins. It's a relentless, incredibly difficult, and truly never-ending battle. And that's a lesson that feels more important today than maybe ever before.